currently 26 degrees outside. In Ireland, normally it never gets really above 20 for the summer, except on rare occasions, so it's pretty hot. I know people in other countries are going, no, it's not hot, but for here, yeah, it's pretty hot. Okay, so this week on the show what I want to do is talk about some of my old cameras. So I have a collection of classic cameras. Some of them are digital cameras and a couple are film cameras. The first one I want to talk about is this. It is the Panasonic Lumix GF1. So what was significant about the GF1 was it was one of the first mirrorless cameras that kind of took the market by storm, and it was kind of the first one of the early ones that kind of made mirrorless mainstream because it was so small. I mean, it was kind of compact camera size. I mean, obviously not by today's standards, it's fairly large now compared to, say, some of the newer cameras. But still, like, if you look at this, you can see it's pretty small. So some of my favorite images taken with a compact or with a mirrorless camera over the years I've actually taken with this camera. It's actually pretty good. I mean, it's slow by today's standards. The camera itself is actually quite slow to operate, but it's a 12 megapixel sensor and it's actually pretty good. The dynamic range is pretty bad on it compared to newer cameras. But the 20mm lens that I'm using on this here was actually really good, and this was, I bought this when it first came out, and this was my first mirrorless camera, and that's kind of why I kept it too, because it's a piece of history for me. Okay, so next up, moving back in time, we have the Canon 5D Mark I. This was the original Canon 5D. I've done a whole separate video about this, so I won't go on about it too much. But it was the first full-frame mirrorless, or first full-frame digital camera that kind of made it into the mainstream market. This was a great camera. Mine broke recently, and again I have a whole separate video about that, which I will link in the description below. Until the mirror fell off, this was still working perfectly and was a great camera. But anyway, moving on. So this was the Canon EOS 5, not to be confused with the EOS 5D. And the EOS 5 is a film camera, and this was the first film camera that I bought myself. And this is kind of my first foray into serious photography, and I love this camera. I still use it. I still take shots with it every now and again. In fact, there's actually film in it right now. I actually love this camera. I still use it a lot. It's actually really good. The autofocus is quite fast on it, and you still get great shots with it for film. And this is another old film camera of mine. This is the Yashica FXD. Now, this was my very first camera. It was a hand-me-down from, it was actually my sister's camera, but not this actual model, because the one I had actually fell apart. All of this came off and a few other things stopped working on it. So I actually bought this on eBay to get a replacement version of it. And unfortunately this has now stopped working properly as well. Every now and again the mirror just gets stuck on it, or the shutter gets stuck open. So I probably could find somebody to fix this, but I'm not sure it's worth the effort anymore. But still, I love this camera, and the lens is actually a really good lens on it. It's a 50mm 1.4. I've used this with my Fuji camera a few times, and it's actually really good quality. So that was my first ever camera, first camera that I ever used, and still have one. Okay, and last but not least is my Nikon D700, which I talked about last week. So again, this was Nikon's first kind of consumer level full frame camera, and this was a highly regarded camera, and it's still a really good camera. I still use it. It's about 8 years old, and no problems with it. Works perfectly. Still really good quality images with it. As I said in last week's video, the dynamic range is kind of lacking in it compared to, say, modern DSLRs, but other than that, it's still a really good camera and really good image quality. It's only 12 megapixels, so by today's standards it's not a lot when you consider now the D850 is 46. Oh, and I almost forgot, I also have the original Fuji X100. This was the original of this camera, and it was Fuji's kind of first foray into this mirrorless form factor, although this is a it's not an interchangeable lens camera. It was the first kind of this rangefinder style that they later followed with the X100T, F and S and all the other variations thereof. And this was the non-X-trans version, so it has a Bayer sensor. and it's 12 megapixels, but it's actually still a really good camera, and I have a review of this as well in a separate video, which I will also link below. So that is the original X100. Okay, so this week on the Photo Geek Show, I'm going to give you a quick Lightroom and Photoshop tip. So let me just hop over to Lightroom here. So this is a photo I took during the week. It was a beautiful sunny day in Dublin City, and I went into the canal to try and get some nice kind of summery images. So here is the shot of the canal that I took. So there's a kind of a quick technical cleanup I want to do on this. I've kind of processed the image kind of basically already, but if I zoom right in here, you may not be able to see this too easily on the video, so I'm going to zoom right in. So you can see there's some chromatic aberration here. It's not a lot, but it's enough to be kind of distracting. So there's an easy way to get rid of this. It's actually quite simple with the tools in Lightroom. So if I use the defringe, I can just bring this up and drag this all the way over to red, and I have to bring it up quite a bit here. And I also find I need to bring this up on this side as well. And we no longer have any chromatic aberration. But unfortunately, because the boat is red down here, we've actually cut into the red of the boat, and we don't want to do that. So there is the quickest way to do this is to fix it in Photoshop. So let me show you what to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to send it to Photoshop by going Edit In, Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. And this is very important that you do this rather than just edit in Photoshop. Okay, so when you do this, it will send it to Photoshop as a smart object, so you will be able to open it in Camera Raw and all the settings will be intact. So the image has loaded into Photoshop. So what we need to do now is, the first thing we need to do is duplicate this layer. So I'm just going to go, and this is important as well, what you need to do is New Smart Object via Copy. So the reason you use this rather than just duplicate layer is if you just duplicate the layer, any changes you make to one layer will be the same in the other, because it's actually cloning the layer. Whereas when you go New Smart Object via Copy, it creates a whole new smart object. So what we need to do now is we double click on this to bring up the Camera Raw controls. Okay, and what we need to do is I go to the lens section, and I'll turn the defringe off because I don't need it down here, and then just click OK and let this update. Okay, so now all we need to do is just add a mask to this, invert the mask, switch over to our paintbrush, and just paint over the red. And there you go, that's all there is to it. So I can take this further if I want. What I can do is I can do a bit more tweaking to the image just to kind of make it even nicer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I am going to merge the contents of the previous layer by going Command Option Shift E, and then I'm going to edit this in Luminar. So I'm going to go to my edit menu, Skylum Software and Luminar. Okay, so we're in Luminar now, and I'm just going to add a few things. I will start by using the Accent AI filter. I'm just going to bring this up a bit. I'm not going to do too much to this, and even straight away that looks a lot better. And then I'm going to add a Orton effect, which will kind of just give it a slight little kind of warmish glow, and even at that I'm kind of happy with that. That's all I need to do. So I'm just going to hit apply. Now we're rendered back into Photoshop, and all I have to do now is just save the Photoshop file. And if I jump back into Lightroom, you can see that here is our finished image. And that's all there is to it. So there is your Lightroom quick tip for this week. It's kind of a geeky, nerdy thing, so I thought it was perfect for this show. So there you have it. That's how you correct for chromatic aberration if the standard tools aren't working and you need to kind of do a bit of selective editing. You do have to use Photoshop, I'm afraid. You can't do it just in Lightroom unless there is some magic way that I'm not aware of. If there is, by all means let me know in the comments. But yeah, so there you have it. been bugging me a bit lately. I keep seeing this thing online where loads of people keep posting stuff on YouTube calling it B-roll. So there's been a couple of prominent YouTubers that have made the word B-roll famous lately, but unfortunately a lot of people seem to be mistaking what B-roll actually means. B-roll is not a sequence of slow motion footage. That's not where the term B-roll actually came from. So what actually is B-roll then? So let me give you an example that everybody's seen. So you've often seen on the news, you'll have a reporter reporting on a story. So say it's like an incident at a shopping mall, for example, and the reporter will be standing in the mall giving the report, and then the newscast will cut away to footage of various places around the mall. You'll often see like just basically cutaways of different things, and then it'll cut back to the reporter. So that whole sequence of footage that covers the reporter talking is what B-roll actually is. It's sequences like that that are used to cover other sequences. It's not a whole separate section of footage that stands on its own, and it certainly doesn't mean that it has to be slow motion either. So B-roll is kind of something that's been around for a very long time. The actual term comes from when people used to use linear edit suites. So that was like literally tape to tape editing, but through the internet and through kind of people's modern take on it, it's something that's become twisted and taken out of context. And I've seen loads and loads of people posting stuff on YouTube calling it B-roll, and it's not B-roll at all. It's nothing to do with B-roll, and that's simply because a couple of YouTubers have made the term B-roll really popular. There's nothing wrong with this. I've nothing against these YouTubers. I think they're actually doing some great work, and I don't have no problem with that at all. My issue is that people don't understand what the term actually means, and unfortunately it's been taken out of context, and that's where we are right now. So to give you an example of what B-roll actually is, I will now do a very small short documentary segment in the style of a news piece. So I had a piece recently on my blog where I talked about the importance of looking at your pictures after you take them. So not just kind of taking your pictures, looking at them once and then storing them away somewhere in your file system. And another side of that is it can be good sometimes too to get your images printed. So rather than just kind of looking at them on the computer, actually get them printed out. So whether that is get prints made or print them yourself, or another thing you can do is you can actually get books made. So a while ago I got quite a few books made through blurb.com, which is a really good online service. So let me just kind of give you a look. So here's one I got made of images I took while in New York and Washington DC, and there's actually the quality of blurb books is actually really good. So if I just turn this around, so you can see. Now this is kind of the most expensive one you can get. It's kind of all the quality options turned up full. So it is glossy paper, the print quality is good, well, quality is maximum, and it's a hardcover wrap. So the wrap, as you can see, it goes right around, and we've got a nice back cover as well. So I actually have 3 books made. The second one I got done was from Vienna. Actually, this was the first one I got done. So, and again, the images in this are all from my Nikon D700. So again, getting back to camera that I love. This is turning into the D700 show. It's not meant to be. This is slightly thinner, but again, the quality of the books from Blurb is actually really good. And then this one, oh, this is massive, as you can see, and this is all photos from Dublin parks that I've taken over the years. I kind of put together into a single book. As I said, they're quite expensive to get made, but it's definitely worth it. I think anyway. The quality is actually really good, and it's a really nice way to look at your pictures, and it's also good for showing to other people as well. And another thing too is you can use them as portfolio pieces. So it's something I highly recommend doing. It's a great way to kind of have your images to showcase, but even just for yourself, so that you can go back and look over them and you can see how you've progressed, and just as a learning tool even for yourself. So this isn't an ad for Blurb or anything like that. There's actually quite a few different places you can get books made. I like Blurb because it's fairly hassle-free and it's integrated into Lightroom. So I did all these books through the Lightroom interface. So it was fairly straightforward to do. Didn't take very long to set up, and They take about 2 weeks to ship. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I just thought it was something worth mentioning. I really like them, and yeah. Okay, so there is your example of what B-roll actually is. So when I was talking there, and then I cut away to the sections of the book while I was talking, that's a B-roll segment. That's what B-roll actually is properly. It's, as I said again, it is not a sequence of slow motion footage. And this has been a public service announcement brought to you by the Photography Geek. Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of the Photo Geek Show. I hope you have enjoyed this and found it useful, something interesting. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share away. And also check out my Patreon page if you want to support this channel and help me make more videos like this. And also check out my blog. Links will be in the description below. So, thanks again for watching, and see you next week. I like close-ups for some reason. It's mainly so I can frame out my bald head. Oi.